The top 5 mistakes beginners make in virtual wholesaling real estate. What is up, guys? Zach Ginn here, and in today's video, I'm going to break down the top 5 biggest mistakes I see virtual wholesalers make, especially starting out as a beginner, and how to actually avoid these mistakes. I promise you, I've made pretty much all these mistakes starting out in my virtual wholesaling journey, but I want to help you undo these mistakes you're making or these bad habits, and hopefully if you're a beginner, maybe we can get rid of those habits starting out so you don't have them in the beginning so you can actually be as successful as possible. This is the stuff I feel like a lot of virtual wholesalers make a mistake on. As somebody that teaches thousands and tens of thousands of people how to get their first deal, their 100th deal in virtual wholesaling real estate and regular wholesaling real estate, when I look at a lot of beginners, I see them make a lot of common mistakes, and these are the top 5 ones I see, and I'm going to break it down. So before we get into it, do me a big favor and smash that like button and subscribe. Do me a big favor, check out freewholesaling.com. If you go through the course, I'm telling you, I teach you how to avoid all these crazy common mistakes. So let's kind of break down, starting off, number 1, the biggest mistake. Let's just get it out. Let's kind of reveal this, the elephant in the room. What's the biggest one? This is a mistake I see so many virtual wholesaling beginners make, and it drives me crazy every time I see it. And it kind of upsets me to a point because you probably didn't go there for freewholesaling.com, and this is one that if you make the mistake, you will lose the deal pretty much 70% of the time. And this is not staying on the phone with your sellers when you have the contract. What do I mean by this? If you do not stay on the phone with your seller, you are not going to be successful with getting the contract signed. So if I'm talking to a seller, a motivated seller, and I agree on a price, we're all good, we're ready to go, and unfortunately I don't stay on the phone, the seller is just not going to go with me. So what do I mean by this? A lot of beginner wholesalers make a mistake. They get a contract sent to them, they get a price that they agree to, let's say $30,000, and they send the contract over. They say, oh, Mr. Seller, I'm going to send you the contract. Call me when it gets signed. Boom. What happens is, day 1, they don't get a call back. Day 2, they don't get a call back. Day 3, no call back. And they're like, oh my God, my seller's ghosting me. What did I do? Oh my gosh, this is a terrible situation. And they try to blame everything. And I get this in the group a lot, the Wholesaling House for Real Facebook group. Like, seller's ghosting me. I sent the contract. They always ghost you after they send the contract. And why is this? Why is this a problem? Like, what's going on here? And what I've honestly found is, when you send a contract over to a seller, it's kind of like telling somebody to clean their room. And what do I mean by this analogy? So remember you're like 9, 10, 11 years old, and you had a messy room, and one of your parents told you to go clean it up. Like, you're just chilling. They tell you to clean it up, and you chill in the room. You're usually just gonna, oh, I don't want to do it. I gotta go to school tomorrow, or whatever. I gotta wake up early, whatever. I'm just not gonna do it, right? Or play video games. Well, you're probably going to procrastinate, not do it, right? And a lot of motivated sellers are like this avatar, more or less. Not the best thing out here, but it's absolutely true. Now, what are you going to do if your parents stay in your room and say, I'm not leaving this room until you clean it? You're like, I want him out of my room. Okay, fine, I'll go clean it. Like, you're kind of like breathing down their neck. You're getting it done. The same analogy works for virtual wholesaling real estate with the seller. If you send a contract to a seller, they might, but I don't want to do it right now, or I'll do it later, or I don't want to open it, or maybe I'll have my uncle look at it. Whatever. You're making all these excuses in your head. A lot of these motivated sellers are, and they don't get the contract signed. Now, if this is why I always tell you, stay on the phone with the seller when you send the contract over. That's why at freewholesaling.com, when I show you actually the whole process and how I actually do things, the first thing I can tell you is I stay on the phone with the seller. I'm like, okay, Mr. Seller, what I'm gonna do is send you over the agreement. Let's stay on the phone and I can kind of break down the agreement with you. We have any questions and show you exactly how to sign it the right way. It's being sent right now to the email. Do you see it right now? You're kind of leading that conversation, because if you don't, you're not gonna get the deal. You're just plain out, 70% of the time, a lot of these sellers are just gonna ghost you. Maybe it's 50-50 of really good rapport, but sometimes not everyone has that really good rapport, and that could be a huge issue I see. So number 1, I can tell you, stay on the phone with your seller. I don't care what it costs, so if it's an extra hour or 2 hours, it is always worth it. When you're doing virtual wholesaling, you kind of have to breathe down their neck. The last part about this is another reason why sellers don't like it is because, number 1, if they have an objection over the contract, like what's inspection period, what's earnest money, what's the stuff. The thing is, an unanswered objection is always a huge red flag because the objection's not answered, right? And that's a common sales thing. The problem is if the seller has an objection with the contract and they're reading it by themselves and there's no one there to solve that objection right there, they're gonna think it's a scam, they're gonna think it's terrible, and they're just not gonna do anything. If you stay on the phone, they have a question about the contract, you can explain it to them, and they're like, oh, okay, that answered the objection. Now they go and sign it. The cool part is like you're on the phone with them, it's like, oh, I wanna get off this phone conversation. This is kind of annoying. I just gotta go sign the contract. If you're kind of putting that extra pressure on them, it's going to work really, really well. So that is number one. Big virtual wholesaling mistake. Stay on the phone with your sellers. I've said it so many times. I'm going to keep saying it. I'm probably going to say it for the next 20 years for virtual wholesaling stuff. But like, you got to stay on the phone with your sellers. Number two, huge mistake I see with a lot of motivated sellers. You get a deal with a motivated seller, and in virtual wholesaling, if you do not follow up with them, it's going to be a huge problem. So that is going to be number two here, is just not following up with your sellers enough. I think a lot of virtual wholesalers out here, they do not follow up with their sellers enough, and you need to be following up with your seller. That is a huge piece of advice I can give to you, is follow up with your sellers more and more and more. If someone says they want to get a call in 6 months, call them in 3 months. Number three here is not marketing to your cash buyers enough. I don't think a lot of wholesalers out here market to their cash buyers enough, especially in virtual wholesaling, especially changing times we have in virtual wholesaling and real estate markets. You need to spend more time with your cash buyers. You guys probably aren't spending enough time with your cash buyers. I'm telling everyone watching this right now, you most likely need to spend an extra hour to 2 hours every single week finding more cash buyers, keeping up your relationships with your current cash buyers. I think that's a big one, and updating their buy box criterias. It's going to help you out so much right now. So always market to your cash buyers more. If you think you ran out of cash buyers, cold call all your for rents, go to all the Facebook real estate investing groups, try to find more hedge funds. Hedge funds are still buying right now. It's definitely one I can tell you is very, very important. Number four here, a big mistake I see a lot of virtual wholesalers make is they do not pull government lists. This is something I think is absolutely ridiculous. If you want to go to a list and you get annoyed that everyone has already marketed this list, and then you're like, oh, it's terrible, guys. I have people that come up to me on like the one-on-one coaching calls that say, Zach, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's just such a terrible virtual wholesaling market. I cold call, everyone said someone already talked to me, it's terrible. Oh, I need to go to another market. And this brings me back to the quote I always tell everybody, but it's absolutely true. Do not blame the market, blame the marketing. And for most wholesalers out here, that is a key point you gotta understand. Most of the time, if you're in a decent virtual wholesaling market, you're not gonna have a problem. The problem is with your marketing. So if you go to a good virtual wholesaling market, even like Richmond, Virginia, which is an amazing virtual wholesaling market, if you constantly go after a list that every other wholesaler in that market's going after, you're going to constantly get the results that others do. And most virtual wholesalers going after a common list is not going to do well. You have to go to the list that no one else is pulling. So this is why you have to be doing virtual wholesaling with government lists, going after the lists that are harder for most wholesalers to get. And one key thing I can tell you right here is it's not harder to get the list. It's just more time intensive and more work. It's actually easy to get the list. It's just time intensive to get the phone numbers, maybe to cross-reference some of the data. These are code violations, probates, fire damage properties, water shutoffs, liens, arrest records, everything I teach at freewholesaling.com. It's not a difficult list to be going after, but it's very time intensive, and most wholesalers aren't willing to go after this list. So when you talk to these lists, it's gonna have the best pound for pound advantage of a motivated seller. So it's definitely something I do recommend. Number five, this is such a key point here, but this is staying below the median home price, the median value of a house. Guys, when I find someone that struggles in their virtual wholesaling, they say, I cold call this list and it was terrible. What I always do is I like to break down, hey, tell me the list you're doing. And 9 times out of 10, they're not doing the list that I tell you. They don't do the criteria I tell you at freewholesaling.com. And I don't get upset. I always have them change it, but I always use that as a lesson. And this is kind of another lesson to tell you. So when I looked up somebody like a month ago on a one-on-one coaching call, and they were struggling. And I was like, well, why are you struggling with your SMS text blasting? They were cold calling in Texas, a SMS text blasting list of only properties that are over $500,000 ARVs. And I'm like, dude, The average ARV is like 250,000 in that county. And that's a decent county. The problem is sellers are more willing to give a discount on something that's cheaper than more expensive. What do I mean by this? This is like a cup of coffee. If you go to Starbucks, right, and you find out a cup of coffee there's like $5, and you know at home you can make a cup of coffee for 25 cents, you're more willing not to go to Starbucks and just get that 25-cent cup of coffee at home, right? You know, it's a little more work, but for $4.75 of equity, like you don't want to give up $4.75 of equity. That's just too much, right? But if I go to like Tropical Smoothie and it costs me $3 to buy the fresh fruit, make the smoothie, buy a smoothie maker, all this stuff, it might cost me $3 and I might spend an hour making that smoothie. It's worth it if I just literally go to Tropical Smoothie and just pay $5. I'm only giving up $2 of quote unquote equity per much. It makes it so much easier because I'm giving up a lot less. It just makes sense for me, right? Same exact thing with wholesaling houses with a motivated seller, with selling the property. Why would they give up $500,000 of equity selling a $5 million house for 20% off the ARV, 80% of the ARV, versus giving 80%, selling it for 80% of a $50,000 house? You're just giving up less equity. It makes a lot more sense. Same thing. So if you stay below the median home price, they're usually cheaper houses, more affordable housing. People are willing to give discounts more on these houses, and most importantly, you actually get a better ROI with your sellers, and you actually get a better ROI on your seller list and a better ROI with your cash buyers, because when your cash buyers are buying as rentals, you actually get better ROIs when they have cheaper rentals. And everyone knows that. So if I'm renting out a property for $500,000, my cash on cash might be 10%, 11%, maybe 12%, like if it's decent, but like if it's in a really nice area. Versus if I buy a $100,000 house, my cash on cash, my ROI is probably gonna be 15, 16, 17%. You just get a better ROI with cheaper houses, and that makes cash buyers more attractive. You actually make more money on the flips, unless you're doing like crazy luxury stuff. So it's definitely good. My last bonus tip here, didn't make the top 5, but I think it's something very important. This is actually something I always do when I'm starting out a virtual wholesaling market. And this is when you're starting out, you need to be researching the top virtual wholesalers in your market. So for example, I see a lot of people bragging and posting really good checks in like Omaha, Nebraska. I don't virtually wholesale in Omaha, Nebraska. I do some JV deals and stuff, but like if I want to start in Omaha, Nebraska right now for virtual wholesaling, what is my first step? I'm going to research my top virtual wholesalers and try to see. So if I see a girl there, she's making maybe $250,000, $500,000 a year wholesaling in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm going to figure out what she's doing, and I'm going to not reinvent the wheel and just do what she's doing right. So if she's SMS text blasting vacant lists, she's making a ton of money doing that, I'm going to be doing that, right? Because that's what works. In different markets, different lists kind of work. It's kind of weird. I always want to test it out. But if this girl right here has spent millions of dollars in marketing in the past 5, 10 years, and she knows what works and what doesn't, I'm going to figure out what she's doing, what areas she's targeting, and just reverse engineer her math. It's going to help me so much more. So that's my biggest recommendation I give to you right now. Find out where your top virtual wholesalers are in your market, or the top wholesalers in that market. Figure out what lists they're pulling, where they're wholesaling, what areas they're targeting, and just do it working for them. It's going to work. Like look at the iPhone. The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. They just found what was working and they built upon that. Same thing for your business. Tesla, right? That's not the first electric car out there, but guess what? He found an electric car, but he made it better. Same thing for your virtual wholesaling business. So guys, that's my top 5 plus 1 big tip, beginning mistakes I think a lot of virtual wholesalers make. Hopefully you learn these mistakes and you don't make these mistakes now in your virtual wholesaling business. If you got any value from this video, do me a big favor and smash the like button and subscribe. Go to freewholesaling.com. All my scripts, recorded conversations, everything you know about virtual wholesaling from start to finish is on there. And like always, please smash the like button and subscribe, and I appreciate it. See you guys soon. Have a blessed one.